Once I worked in security, and at one of the posts we had shifts in pairs, called reinforcement. My partner was Nick, a fan of chatting and taking a smoke break every 15 minutes. Which of these he liked more, I don't even know, probably both, because even when a cigarette was dangling from the corner of his mouth, Nick would still tell stories. It was hard to tell which of his stories were true and which were his own inventions. His theatrical tone during monologues rarely changed. One day he caught a cold and hurt his throat, but this setback didn't stop him from talking. Everything was as usual, except that his hoarse voice took on a slightly rough tone. If his health was fine, he would speak like a nightingale, presenting his thoughts artistically and vividly, full of emotions. One December night, on the eve of Christmas and the New Year, Nick told me this story. "Hey, listen," Nick asked me. "I don't remember if I told you about my buddy John Lomacken." "Maybe you did," I replied. "I'm not sure. I've heard a lot from you." "Well, how about John Lomacken and his beautiful wife? Maybe I've already told you." "Go ahead. If I've heard it before, no big deal, I'll listen again. You won't leave me alone anyway." "Well, here's the thing. I had a friend, John Lomacken. We used to be inseparable. Now, I don't talk to him anymore. He moved to New York and hasn't kept in touch for a long time. John got married before me, even though he had a hard time with girls. He was shy, and the girls didn't really go for him. Outwardly, I don't know about now, but back then, he reminded me a bit of the actor Valery Liev, and he landed a beauty of a wife, so everyone was amazed at how he managed it. John probably didn't even understand why the gorgeous Laura, whom he met at a resort, agreed to marry him. They hung out for a week, went to movies and cafes, and then went to the registry office. All of our acquaintances were in shock, and I was especially surprised. How did someone like John manage to attract a truly beautiful woman to his side, despite his questionable appearance? No, I won't deny it. He's a good, reliable guy, and didn't drink much back then. But still, they seemed like Beauty and the Beast, and the Beauty had to realize that the Beast would never turn into a handsome prince after a kiss. So, they got married and moved into John's 2-bedroom apartment. And from the very first day, it all started. John began to be insanely jealous of his wife Laura toward every man they met, including me. He turned into some kind of maniac. We were sitting at Laura's house one day, and she went to the bathroom, but didn't come back for a long time. John was on edge, his eyes darting around, watching if any men from the company were missing. If one of them was gone, the poor guy would jump up and run to find his beloved in case she was making out with someone in a secluded spot. And it got worse. He made her quit her job, so no one would look at her or try to tempt her. Laura became a housemaid. Then John started eyeing the men in the neighborhood. One day, a neighbor helped Laura carry her bag, and John, coming down the stairs after lunch, saw them together, freaked out, and immediately started a fight. Laura tried to break them up, and then she told him, "If you love someone, you have to trust them. If you don't calm down, I'll divorce you. I don't need such happiness, where you're going to be jealous of me every time I talk to another guy." John cooled down, apologized to the neighbor, and Laura solemnly promised no more jealousy scenes. They made up. John calmed down for a while. Well, he seemed calm on the outside, but on the inside, those emotions were still burning. He told me all the details, shared his worries, and asked for advice. I told him straight out, "John, why did you marry someone like that? You'll never have peace with jealousy. You'll burn out. She didn't marry you for no reason. She even told me in confidence that, deep down, she herself is surprised." It turned out that some sort of mysterious force radiated from John. There was something about him, some inner masculine strength. And then John decided to change his approach. He went on a business trip and then returned suddenly. He said, "They called me for work." He snooped around their apartment, trying to find any signs of a lover. They went on a fishing trip. He suddenly ran back home in the middle of the night, claiming to feel sick, and again trying to catch her off guard. Again, there was no one there. He tried to follow her, even asked me to play the part of a private detective and watch her for him. Nothing. Laura was clear. No secrets. So, John started to believe that maybe true love and loyalty could exist in life. He gradually lost his vigilance, started trusting Laura, and even began to boast about it. And then one day, someone called his phone and said that his wife was an adulteress. "Come home. You'll see for yourself," the voice said. John replied, "I got it. I'm coming." He hung up the phone, laughing, thinking it was some prank. We went over to him with questions about who called and what prank it was. He told us the whole story. And that's when I started laughing because I had been meeting with Laura this whole time. I knew everything about her, the whole inside story, her moves and strategy. My conscience was killing me, but what could I do? I had gotten caught up in the thrill of it all. Plus, Laura was a fighter. We played together. We took risks together. So I began to egg John on, "Let's go and see. Maybe it's not a prank. If it's a prank, then you'll see that your wife is faithful." The sudden visit could be explained by the fact that I'd been urgently called to work. Who knows, any number of reasons could come up. I convinced him to go. We arrived, burst into the apartment, and heard everything shaking in the bedroom. Well, I thought, things were fine. Laura was causing a storm for both her legal husband and me. We rushed in. The scene was clear. Sitting together were Laura and our mutual boss, Michael. And that's when everything unfolded. It turned out that the boss, along with his cunning wife, had orchestrated a multi-step operation to keep their affair hidden from his strict wife. He had arranged for John to marry his mistress. And to keep the mistress from raising any suspicions, they had involved me in the plan. From that moment on, I transferred to security. John started drinking, and eventually, he left town in despair. Nick sighed and lit another cigarette. Then he muttered, "I still don't know who called John that fateful night." You've listened to the first story in this issue. Stay tuned. Next is the second story. Support the author by subscribing and liking. Enjoy the show. Nasty is my wife, a businesswoman and respected figure who works as the dean of the math department at a very prestigious university. We've been together for almost 15 years. We have a daughter who is just as passionate about science as her mother. I'm an engineer, and I'm often sent on business trips, including to overseas productions. So sometimes, I don't see my family for weeks, but that was never a reason for me to cheat on my wife. I've always been faithful to Nasty, and I was sure that she was faithful to me as well. But one winter evening, everything changed. I was supposed to go on a business trip for a few days, but when I got to the airport, my boss called and said the trip would be postponed until the end of the month. I could return home instead. So I thought, why not surprise my wife right from the airport? I stopped at a flower shop, bought a huge bouquet of her favorite white roses, and went to her office. It was already late in the day, so all the students' classes should have been over, and most of the staff would have already left. I hoped to catch her alone, surprise her with flowers, and take her to dinner. I quietly tiptoed to her office door, trying to figure out if anyone else was in there. If no one else was there, I'd just rush in and shout, "Surprise!" For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I started to open the door, but heard female moans and light rhythmic tapping. Of course, I wasn't a child, and I understood what was going on, but I didn't want to believe that it was my wife behind that door. What if it wasn't her? Maybe some students had snuck in, I thought, and decided not to go in. Otherwise, it would have been incredibly awkward. I stepped away from the door, sat down on a bench at the end of the hall, and waited. After about 5 minutes, a young student came out and walked toward the men's restroom. I decided to check who the woman was that was moaning. When I entered the office, I found my wife in the back corner by the desk, with her blouse unbuttoned. Seeing me, Nasty was so surprised that she almost fell off her chair. "Darling, I thought you were on a business trip. What's wrong? Is everything okay?" She squeaked in a scared tone. I had never seen her scared before. She was usually strict, confident and in control, but now she was cowering in the corner like a mouse. I think she realized from my look that I figured everything out. I threw the flowers on the floor and rushed to the bathroom where the young guy went, but Nasty didn't notice where I went. She probably thought I ran outside because I heard her quickly walking down the stairs in heels. When her steps stopped, I tried to pull myself together and figure out what to do. Of course, my fists itched, but I was an adult, and I had to control myself. I should at least talk to the guy, so I shouted, "Come out!" A few seconds later, the young guy came out of the last stall. He was crying, trembling, and sniffling. "Who are you?" he asked, wiping his tears with toilet paper. At that moment, my anger completely disappeared. I calmly spoke to him, explaining that I'd heard strange sounds from the office, and now I saw how upset he was. The young guy was silent for a while, but I pressured him, and he confessed everything. They almost kicked me out of math class. Professor Nasty failed me on my third retake, even though I knew everything. My dorm mate told me he had the same issue with her last year, and the only way to pass was to sleep with her. Only then would Professor Nasty calm down. If I hadn't, I would have been expelled and kicked out of the dorm, sent back to the village. I've got a girlfriend in this city, and I don't know how to look her in the eye after what I did. My neighbor said it was nothing, just forget about it. But now I realize I'll never forget it. The guy wanted to say more, but threw up right on the floor of the bathroom. I did my best to not think about the fact that we were talking about my wife. I just left. When I got home, I found Nasty pacing around our bedroom. "Darling, where have you been? I was so worried. I looked everywhere for you, called you. I thought something happened. You disappeared so suddenly from my office. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, Nasty. But everything is not going to be okay for you anymore. I know everything. I talked to your student, and he told me everything about what's been going on. I'm going to report you to the university president, and then we'll see what happens." I kept my promise. I told her bosses how she gave grades based on her own criteria, and asked them not to share the information with the students, but to take all necessary measures. Nasty was fired. She'll never find a good job again, and she won't see our daughter either. I won't allow such a monster to raise my child. I still can't believe I lived with a woman capable of such things. As for our divorce, I hope there's no need to explain. It's pretty clear.